Hello and welcome to another episode of Duel the Day. Today we got the pleasure of speaking to Pamela Wagner, and we talked about things like therapy, parenting, screen time, AI, and even food. Now, Pamela has a super interesting background. Right now, she heads up Ajala Digital, which is a global marketing agency focused on adding value to competitive businesses with Google and Meta advertising. So, super cool. Now, before founding that company, she worked at Google and collaborated with companies in Europe and Africa. And she's even been to over 100 countries. Insane. Now, in 2017, she was honored as one of the Forbes 30 under 30 for Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. And she's been featured in media outlets such as ABC News, Forbes, Yahoo, Mashable, MSN, Washington Times, Google Startup Grind, and many more. Now, most recently, she's building something called the Hustle Less, Live More, or Hustle Less, Live More, which she calls the healthy research-based antidote to a toxic hustle hard culture. Guys, we know you're going to love this one, so relax, make sure your headphones are snug, and enjoy the episode.
So at any point in time when you're sick, your body will ask you to rest and relax. And unless you give your body to rest and relax, it cannot heal fully.
I would imagine you have lots going on based on your background, the companies you worked for, and what you're doing. What are some major projects that you're working on right now, and why are you excited about them?
So one of the major things I'm working on right now is that I want to use the ad skills that me and my team have to help more holistic healthcare companies get more marketing, more leads, more promotion, like pretty much get the word out there about more like the original healing methods that we have, right? Some people call it alternative. I don't necessarily like using that. But so give that a little bit more space. And then on like the personal development side, we just extended our collaboration with Salesforce. So we're going to do some more workshops for them and yeah, helping more people hopefully release trauma and stress. Yeah.
I feel like that's super important in today's world. There's a lot of like negative things that affect us on a regular basis between social media and I guess the way that we were taught to perceive the world. I think tons and tons of people saw our parents, our grandparents go to work, get jobs, and create these societal norms that now people have trouble like coping with. And like, I don't want to have that type of life where I go and work a 9 to 5. I want something different. So I'm happy that you're teaching people how to see that, because that's super
Yeah.
important today.
And I've just like seen way too many people spend way too much time with therapists. And what I mean by that is like I see people, I've been with therapists like years, and I'm like, you shouldn't be with the same therapist for years. Like either you work on a problem, you solve it within a couple of months, you make progress, or you don't. But I think there's better models, better modalities out there to solve whatever issues one is dealing with in much more efficient ways than what we don't know these days.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that Tony Robbins touches on in his training course is that there are several different types of therapies, and all of them work, but they work for different reasons and at different paces. There's certain therapies that are 80, 90, 100% effective, but it takes a couple of years for you to actually like reach those,
Yeah.
aha moments, whereas other therapies are a little bit more streamlined, or at least they attack it, the therapy session in a different way. So yeah, it's good that you're talking about that, because that's a hard point when I tell people I'm a life coach. I don't think they understand what that means in today's world. So and there's different types of life coaches, so I guess that makes them even more confusing.
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
So what I know you went to school and got several degrees. What were you degrees in, and why did you choose to learn about those specific industries or modalities?
So I like to take people back a little bit. So I finished high school at the age of 16, which was about 2 to 3 years earlier than most people in Austria. And so I always had the dream to study at Harvard, but at that age, the internet was way different and I had no idea about, how to get scholarships, not even speaking about affording it. Like it just seemed like this mountain I would not be able to climb in that moment. And so what do you do when you don't know what you want to study? You study business and economics.
Yeah, I did
I
that.
stayed in Austria and Vienna and studied for free, did my bachelor's in that, and took finance and accounting as specializations because I wouldn't get into any other specialization.
That sounds so fun.
Oh God, I struggled because it's just like it was not my thing at all. And then my family was kind of like, well, a bachelor's degree is not enough at that time, and so you need a master's degree. So what you gonna do? And I was kind of like, well, if you guys want me to do a master's degree, then I'm going to determine which university that will be at.
Yeah,
And so I did one in a master's degree in international business in Dubai and Shanghai.
very
And so that
nice.
was good. I always say it was like my practical bachelor degree where I really understood certain concepts. And then a couple of years after that, I did a degree at Harvard Extension School in psychology, another master's, just because I felt like I'd gathered so much experience in the personal development space that I wanted to complement that with an academic background. Because a lot of things in the space are still considered woo woo by people, even though the science is all out there. Like we know it. So I just wanted to add that background for some people who need some more data and studies
Yeah.
sometimes.
No, sometimes they do, but yeah, the science is definitely out there. So it sounds like you wanted to learn so you could help people. Or were those values taught to you by your parents, or did you have a mentor growing up? Where did you want to help people like that?
So I'm not sure how much I'm certain it relates somehow to my childhood. I just like right now I'm not consciously aware of that. The one thing I just noticed is that one thing that's always been easy for me is to help other people see opportunities that they haven't seen before or haven't realized before. And then make them aware of not just the fact that they exist, but that they can actually go for them and realize them for themselves. So everything I do pretty much evolves around that. Just helping people broadening their perspective, their mind, and not just have that tunnel vision, but knowing that there's so many other ways to live, so many other stories out there that they can literally just grab in a second and decide, you know what, this is going to be me from now on. It's going to be different.
That's good. Yeah, and I uh I think it's important that we help people see those different perspectives because people can go through the same traumatic events and different people can view those events very differently. And some can turn it around and use it as something positive that propels them forward. And then other people can look at it as something that confines them in life or limits their choices. So yeah, that's awesome that you teach that. Is there any specific type of therapy that you use with your clients or whoever you're coaching?
So I would say a lot is based on cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, nice.
So, the idea that you can literally create your own reality and do whatever you want if you learn how to work with your mind. But underlying to that, like I tend to sometimes refer people to do, let's say, family constellation. Sometimes I tell them to, start going to a physiotherapist or to do some sound healing or to do art therapy. So it's, I pretty much help people get on the right path and then also for them to become aware of most of these modalities because most aren't aware of it, which is surprising to me, but that's just what it is. So yeah, it's like helping people understand what's out there basically for me to heal without taking any pills.
Nice. Yeah, and I second that. I think that's an important stance to take in today's world because like you were talking about the science of how these therapies work and how they are beneficial, there's also science that shows certain pharmaceutical drugs are not really the best to have under certain situations, high levels of stress or whatever it may be. So, obviously helping people see that and sharing that perspective with them really helps as well, because those can be harmful. Those could help. Those could act. Those pharmaceutical drugs can put people in those negative mental spaces.
Yeah, it's what I tell people is like, look, if you're really, really struggling, it can help in the
Sure.
first place to reduce certain symptoms, but it should never be taken as something long term. And I think there should definitely be an age limit to it, especially, anything like below 25. Like, I'm very, very doubtful about that. Like, and these days we have like 18, 19-year olds taking antidepressants. You don't need
Right.
antidepressants. You need to go outside. You need to put your phone away. You need to do sports. You need to eat healthy. And you need to do something that is fun to you, right? And you notice that most people that are on these pills actually don't have these things. So I've started to screen people where I'm like almost like a precondition to working together is like, hey, which areas of your life do you have in order? And if you don't have at least like 2 to 3 of these in order, then get those in order first before we work together.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible how many people forget that exercising is healthy for you. Like, they just hop in their car and go to work and sit down all day and come back in the car sitting down, and at home sitting down watching TV, and they think they're living a healthy life. And definitely feel like you have to move around a little bit more than that. So, one of the other things that I saw on your website was a couple of your recent blog posts talk about control. Why did you feel like control was important to talk about right now?
So I think especially right now we have so many external influences like social media where we can literally see every single thing that's going on in other people's lives that we weren't able to see before. It's so easy for us to say, you know what, I'm going to blame John out there for me feeling bad because he did XYZ. So we've kind of like lost that feeling of like self agency and really us determining our lives. And so, like, don't try to control what's outside. Forget about that. Start with yourself. And one of the easiest but also hardest ways is to understand, what am I judging right now? And this applies to me as I'm speaking. Like, there's still things I judge, and that's a mirror to myself. What annoys me, right? So typically when I get frustrated, when I get angry about something, I observe it and I ask myself, well, what is it that's actually triggering that? And typically it's something that I still judge in somebody else. I'm like, well, why do I judge it? Well, okay, it's something I can't control. It's influencing me, but I can't control other people listening loudly on her music outside, right?
Right.
But I can change how what I do. So kind of like taking the control back from trying to control external factors and more to the inside again. But that's only possible when we reduce that outside noise, when we turn down that volume and go more inside.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, with anything that happens to us in life, we choose the reaction. Like I was saying earlier, someone can go through the same traumatic events, and one person can choose to see it in a positive light. That's an important thing to realize. And the other side of that too, because a lot of people would hear that and say, "Oh, it's not just about thinking positive." You're right. It's about thinking positive long term. Because if anyone's just hearing this as a new point of view, you have to realize that your body has been going through the whole negative mindset, or at least viewing things that way, for a long time. So that's what you're used to. So whenever you introduce the positive mindset, it's going to take some time for it to actually make sense and for you to feel those benefits. So I think that's an important part of that as well.
Yeah, and I think, these days, like, there is more and more talk about mental health issues, which is good. And more and more people are getting access to services that they need. But I've also seen that people end up being diagnosed with issues that don't really exist. So they're being diagnosed with depression, they're being diagnosed with anxiety, and all these things that might be true in the moment, but aren't true in the long run because, again, they should eat properly. They should, go outside, do sports, do something altruistic, right? Like maybe a certain philanthropy project or like volunteer somewhere. So we tend to make these diagnoses these days without actually helping people fix the baseline of their life first. And so that way we just lose so much money in the economy because we now create these reasons why people can't work. And you can see this on social media when they comment on stuff. And when somebody says that, when somebody appeals to our own self agency, a lot of people come along and say, oh, but like you're pretty much like degrading somebody's issues. You're what's the word, you're gaslighting them and so on. I'm like, no, I wouldn't do you any favor if I bought into your story because I know it's not true, because I'm literally saying that you're not able to overcome this, which isn't true, because every human being has like such a power to overcome this. It's all within us, but it also takes our own will. It's not
Right.
easy. Like, I admit that. It's easier to say, you know what, because of my anxiety, I can't do stuff. That's so easy to say. And it's much
Right.
harder to say, you know what, I'm going to sit down every day, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to throw out all the sugar in my house, I'm going to start working out every second day. That's harder. Behavior change is hard,
Oh yeah.
right? But the life one can have when you actually understand these things and apply these is going to be so much better than when you just say, you know what, because of my anxiety, I need to control what everybody else around me is doing. So just so that I feel good, which is not sustainable at all.
Yeah, no, no. And anyone who kind of like takes those diagnoses and just takes them to heart and believes that because they were diagnosed with anxiety that they have anxiety forever. I urge you to find a video on social media. It's kind of short. One side is a kid sitting at a computer where he was asked to do math, and I'm guessing the kid's somewhere like 6 to 8 years old. And then 30 minutes later, it's the same kid watching Star Wars. Now, when that kid was doing math, he was spinning around in the chair, he was moving around all over the place. But then when he was watching something that he liked, he was still and focused. And so, depending on what we are doing, we
Mm-hmm.
can show signs of anxiety, ADHD, whatever. But if it's something that we're passionate about or that we care about, a lot of those symptoms go away. So, understanding that as a part of the diagnosis is, I think, good to touch on as well.
Yeah, and it's, especially with like kids these days, it's so easy to give these diagnoses because, like, yeah, we just give them devices and we just want them to shut up. I mean, our parents managed it as well, that they took a book with us when we went somewhere, that they took a game with us, right? That there was some sort of physical entertainment for us. And so these days, I think it's just like some people want certain things to be easy without understanding what it actually takes to do them well. And I don't know who said this, but it's like you need a license for everything except to be a parent.
Hmm.
And I think that applies pretty well to today's, state of the economy around having children. But we are not doing a children a favor, because studies have shown that once, like, the more you expose a child to a screen, the less the creativity they have, the less imagination they have. Like, they lack critical problem solving skills that children build by facing problems, by jumping off trees, by, learning to dig in the mud and getting their hands dirty, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
And
can you guys hear me okay?
yeah,
Hi, Tyler.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. So I had another meeting literally across campus, and had to run back over here and it's
Oh,
like
good.
90 degrees outside. But anyways, the whole parent having, even if there was a certification for being a parent, I still don't think it would help. Um, it's uh, it's definitely very challenging, and I agree with a lot of what you guys are talking about since I jumped in here. You know, I think the more boxes that we create to label where our kids are, mentally, whether it's ADHD, whether it's, oh, they suffer from this, they can't focus here. Eventually, they're going to understand that box and that there's a label over them, and I think that has a lot of downstream effects later on, right? If they go through most of their like childhood without knowing that they have a quote unquote diagnosis of something, um, I think a lot of those things could potentially go away, especially based on what the parents doing. But with the whole screen time thing, our my kids watch their fair share of screens here and there at home. Um, the screen time, the way that I look at it is my boys are 4 and 2 right now, and we have third due here in 2 months. Um, they we use it as a survival tool for my wife and I. Like, hey, listen, I can't. I'm tapped out on trying to keep you focused, keep you on task. How about you go watch a show, go watch something, and there's a lot of different things out there. But there's a lot of good stuff too. There's a lot of good educational things, a lot of good things that they can pick up and learn on. I remember Nico, you'll get a kick out of this. The other day, CJ, so he's my 4-year-old. He said to me the other day, we were playing with some of like the magnetic tiles that have like train cars that have hitches and all that stuff. And he looks at me, he goes, "Daddy, this isn't working because there's no hitch pin." And I'm like, "How do you know what a hitch pin is?" I mean, you're 4. I've never told you what a hitch pin is. How do you know what a hitch pin is? He's like, "Oh, Handyman Hal taught me what a hitch pin was." I'm like, "All right, that's a win
That's
for Handyman
awesome,
Hal."
dude.
Like, there you go.
Oh, that's so good.
Um, so yeah, I mean, and I haven't looked at a lot of that research that you're referencing on how screen impacts all of those things, and I'm sure it's very relevant and it's very real. And I think it really just depends on what it is, how much it is, and where you use it. Like I said, for us being a survival tool, so we can have a few minutes of breath to refresh from the parents' aspect. I think it's an interesting thing. But no, I like what you guys are talking about. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure my mic was working and we're all good here.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
but
hilarious.
I think what you were saying, makes a lot of sense. Like I played computer games more than my parents allowed me. I had like certain weekly shows I was allowed to watch, and that's good. But like the screen time I'm referring to is if a kid sits in the park and just has a mobile in front of them. If the kid is in the
Absolutely.
buggy on the street and not looking around, not observing it, but they just looking at the screen, right? Like those are the moments that I so much encourage parents to ideally get rid of,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. When the iPad comes with you when you come out to dinner and adults are having
Worst.
conversation and
No, I cannot. I'm like, you
yeah,
have to like
I
this is
know.
bad. Like watching anything while food is it's bad. And then the thing is the parents then criticize the kid when the kid can't focus on eating the food.
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
cannot like what the heck are you doing? Like seriously, like you cannot blame the kid for this. Like you
Yeah.
just turn off the TV, you eat, you talk about the day, whatever you're grateful for, what they liked, what they did in kindergarten. And then after that, when they're done, they can watch TV or something.
Right. Yeah, no, it's the same. Like whenever we go out to a restaurant, which doesn't really happen very often because it does turn into just chaos of trying to wrangle children and not have them, dump spaghetti on the table next to us, all those things. Um, I see a lot of kids that have either phones or iPads or some type of screen that parents give them at dinner so that they're stationary. They're just there. They don't have to worry about them. And it's one of those convenience things. And it's like that's something where we definitely draw the line on. Like you don't want to set the precedent of whenever you're out eating, out to dinner, out somewhere, or even at your home, like you were talking about, and you're just absolved in your screen. I mean, you can look across a restaurant and adults are even in their phones when there's another person across from them at the table, right?
Yep.
So it's like they see that, they absorb that, they do that, and they think it's right, and then the parents get upset about like, oh, you've been on your iPad for 6 hours today. It's like, well, hey, Dad, you gave it to me at
Yeah,
dinner. You gave it
yeah,
to me when we went
yeah,
outside because you were trying to get something done. You gave it to me
yeah.
here. You gave it to me there, and then it just a lot of those things I chuckle to myself a little bit inside. It's like as parents we do so many things for our kids to try to help them, but also to like make our lives more convenient from a parenting perspective, right? Whatever's easier for us. Like, is it easier to cook a good meal, or is it easier to throw something in the microwave that's crap, or have packaged snacks? All the ultra processed junk, and there's a line that you have to look at. It's like, well, how much effort are you willing to put in? But you have to realize that based on what the inputs are that you're giving your kids, there's preset outputs whether it's any of the mental health issues, all those things that you guys were talking about. And then we have to accept those and can't get mad at it when it's like, oh man, my son has this or he has that. Well, it's like, you chose to parent conveniently versus
Mhm.
adding effort. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, for sure. Pamela, is there any of the studies or the things that you teach, is there like age zones that you kind of talk about with parents and say, hey, in this age range, try to do this, this, and this when it comes to screens? Is there any type of thing like that you help people with?
So the two numbers I just strive for people to keep in mind is that anything you teach your kids from the age 0 to 7 is going to determine how they're going to turn out later. So that age range is just critical. And most people think, oh, they're just a kid, they don't know any better. Trust me, when I was 5, I had my parents figured out. I knew exactly when one person said no, where I could get the yes and how I could get it from. And the other number is 25. And 25 is pretty much the age when our brains are fully matured. So until we are 25, our brains are still growing, our brains are still developing. And so anything that's harmful for the brain can influence it until then. So this is why like certain things shouldn't even be allowed at the age of 16 or 18. Like I believe some of these limits are set way too low. And it's just be aware of, I mean, I'm not saying anything new, but it's not what you say to your kids, it's what you do. So when your kids are doing something that you don't like, take an honest look at yourself, like a real honest look. And most people are going to say in the first place, no. And I've this with my clients. Like when I ask them about that stuff, they're like, no, 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 I don't do this. And after a couple other questions, you notice, no, they're actually doing this or not doing something that they like, right? So, and once you start changing that, forget the talking to kids. Like that's why when some parents complain, oh, my kid isn't listening, but I'm like, don't talk, do or don't do, right? Like this
Right.
is what kids need. Kids need consequences. And it's also okay as a parent to be okay with not being liked. I think a lot of parents these days try to be desperately like their kids and then let them do anything. And the problem with that is that they don't have direction. So the first studies that are now coming out about this are like kids need direction, kids need boundaries, kids need sometimes no and consequences because otherwise later in life they struggle with their identity. They struggle with knowing what they want, they struggle with going for certain goals, they struggle with overcoming challenges. So part of being a parent is just being okay with being disliked sometimes, you
Yeah.
know?
I would imagine if parents have loved their kids, treated them well, even if they come back in one of those moments where the kid hates the parent for that day or that moment, the kid will eventually come back and say that I love you, I'm sorry, I learned something from that moment. But to your point, like you have to build on that. Those down moments are moments. What you do the rest of the time in building that kind of shapes their values. At least that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, and the example I tend to give people from my own life is I never had the latest things. My parents said no to a lot of things, especially buying unnecessary stuff and buying the latest games, buying the latest clothes. And I didn't like it in that moment. I was bullied a lot as well. So it's like, I was like, you're not even helping me. Like, I was so angry so many times. But trust me now in hindsight, like, and I've said it to them, I'm like, I'm super grateful for you saying no all the damn time because it has taught me not to immediately buy the latest thing when it comes out, not to attach my worth or value to any materialistic things, to like think about before I make a purchase, right? And
Right.
these are all values that are so much more important than me being happy in that moment.
Yeah, very true. I want to take a
Yeah.
little. Oh, go ahead, Ty.
Sorry. Yeah. One that it's I love that this just came up because my wife and I were having this exact conversation last night.
That's awesome.
Um, because recently there's been a few times where so she works like a noon to midnight shift, so a lot of times like I'm the only parent at home at night. Do bedtime, do all that stuff, and there's been a few times recently where I'll either say no to something or kids are just going wild, just talking's not an option. So I will grab them and I will hold them on the couch for an extended period of time through all the squirming and all that stuff. And they've started to get upset about it. And I was I was talking to my wife last night because I saw something on how like a lot of issues today with you know, the younger generation, they didn't have a fear of retribution from their parents. Now, retribution might be a strong word, but I knew, like growing up, if I did something bad or did something that was not along with what my parents wanted me to do, there was going to be serious consequences. And granted, you know, this we're talking about throwing toys at a TV and all just silly stuff right now.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, like you said, between 0 and 7, right, those things start now. And not that I want my kids to be afraid of me, but they have to know that they could be or that they should be in certain situations. And so I wanted to get your opinion on that, and maybe like a good way to go about that. Not not that I'm trying to instill fear in my kids. That sounds so bad, but just not being the super likable, you know, parent that you're just talking about. Everybody wants to be their kid's best friend and say yes to everything and all those things. But how to like cultivate that? I guess you could call it respect, even though they don't really understand what respect is at this point. But just have that fear, have that knowing, like, okay, I need to actually get my stuff together here so dad doesn't come and sit on me for a half hour, right?
Yeah, I think most importantly is communicating consequences and then also acting upon them, right? I know of certain people in my close environment that did this thing of like, I'm going to count till 3, and if you haven't done it until 3, you're going to get XYZ consequences. Well, the mistake they made is they always stopped at point 2, point 5, right? Now they're like 1 and 2 and right, and that's like much slower even than I'm doing it now. And then obviously the kids knew I can do whatever I want because mom never gets to 3. And so I came in and I was like, okay, so we're going to do this. I'm going to count till 3. And if by 3 you're not up in your bed, you're not brushing your teeth, you're not going to get to watch TV XYZ. And I was like, 1, 2, 3. And they were like, holy shit, she's counting to 3. I was like, yeah, I said it. I was like, okay, you were not in the bathroom. All right, up in the bed. Done. Like, and trust me, they tried it twice, and after that, it was absolutely clear. But it was because I acted on it, and I was like, I don't care if you cry after that. There's consequences, and you have to brush your teeth or whatever, right? So like, I didn't ask them to do anything unusual. So I think just acting the consequences, and then like consequences can be different, right? I'm a big believer in rewarding positive behavior, but also at the same time making sure that, you know, communicating what is unacceptable behavior, right? And why that is unacceptable, but not getting caught up in explanations, right? Like you don't need to like tell your kid a story about why something's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. That's what it is for now, right? And kids will get that quickly. Like it's they can understand when there's going to be consequences or not. And the most important thing about it is that parents are aligned. I think a big mistake that most parents make is they're not aligned on what they communicate. And if somebody's not aligned, the kid knows, okay, mom says no, so dad says yes. All right, I don't care what mom says, so I'm just going to go to dad and get it anyway. So really, I think as parents having clarity, and that's where I think that even working with an outside party like a therapist or something might help. Because both people come from very different backgrounds, have grown up very differently in most circumstances. So it's okay to not be aligned. Like I think a lot of parents are not aligned in certain aspects, but if you want the best outcome for your kid, you should be, right?
Definitely. Yeah, we do.
That makes sense.
So sometimes I even count to 3 extra fast because I'm ready to deal out consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
no,
that's
sorry.
important.
Go ahead, Nico.
No, you're good. You guys actually made me think of something that I heard recently that my dad reminded me of, that he taught me, because went camping this past weekend and there were some kids close by that were yelling, and the parents around were like, I tried to get my kids never to do that, because if they yell all the time just when they're having fun, it's hard for parents to know when there's an emergency and when they actually need to respond. And so I feel like as a parent, like explaining that to a kid, hopefully getting like a, child version of that helps them understand not to do certain things, whether it's yelling or annoying their parents.
Yeah, and I mean, I was sitting yesterday in this coffee shop, real situation, I kid you not. There was a mom with the little boy. The boy was, I would say, 2.5, 3-ish. Um, and then there was a grandma, so the mom of the mom. And the boy had milk and a cookie, and the milk had a straw, and so he was a little bit playing around with straw. I was like, okay, no problem. And at one point, he had figured out that if he sucked something in through the straw, he can also blow it out again. And it went almost to the other table side where a guy was sitting with a laptop.
Ooh.
And the drop came in about, I would say it was like an inch or two away from the laptop. Inch two, yeah. And they didn't say anything. I was like, if my kid did this, like I was so close to saying something, but I was like, not my kid. I'm gonna keep myself out of this. But if my kid did this, like there would be serious consequences to this right now. Like teaching a kid empathy, teaching a kid the understanding of like, hey, my there's certain personal boundaries. There's certain ways of how a society functions. There's personal space. And if I invade somebody's personal space with my actions, there's going to be consequences. And people might not always communicate these consequences, but it will impact my relationship with that person later. Like if that happened in a like employee boss relationship, the boss might not say something, but trust me, when the next promotion comes up, you're not going to be the first one he thinks about.
Right.
Right? So yeah, it's long-term thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. What I wanted to ask a little earlier, this is again, I want to relate this next question to what we're talking about, but it's also a little bit of a deviation here. So AI is learning tons of stuff and eventually is going to replace things like lawyers, therapists in certain areas and things like that. Is that something that you're preparing for and utilizing? And how do you see AI in the world of therapy and how it can help people?
So I think where it can really help is getting that first help, right? Where I'm like, oh, right now I'm feeling depressed. I need to talk with somebody, right? So that's why it can be really, really beneficial. But the one thing that I've not yet seen AI solve, and even if some companies claim they can, is that human to human interaction. Because we take so much benefit from seeing another person, seeing how they act, and that whole energy exchange. So there's so much stuff happening on a subconscious level that is beneficial for us human beings that any AI, robot, and so on is not able to replicate and won't be able to replicate for such a long time because we as human beings don't fully understand that. And I think it's good that we don't fully understand it.
Yeah, I feel like AI is going to help us learn a lot of stuff, but that's an interesting perspective because, yeah, for especially big industry or big companies that offer up like remote therapy or like a call-in center or something like that, I definitely think that first response would help. But you are totally right. There's tons of stuff in NLP that talks about like body language, different parts of the body swelling if you're thinking about something positive or negative, and all of those little aspects of the physiology of humans is, I would imagine it's going to take AI some time to figure that out, although it is learning at a very fast pace. Do you see yourself using anything AI in your business here in the next year or two?
I think to some extent I'm already using it in certain regards. In the direct work with people one-on-one, I haven't seen it to be of any benefit yet. Like I haven't seen anything surpass my own level of knowledge because a lot of AI is built on certain input. And of course, an
Right.
AI can only give the output of the input that it receives. And what I mean by that is if somebody creates an AI that's biased in certain studies and data that, for example, puts pharma first, then that's how it's going to respond. So it's the other thing is also like, especially in therapy, a lot of people need therapy that goes beyond talking therapy. That, like, for
Right.
example, if you do somatic therapy, like somebody actually like touches you in certain aspects of your body to help you figure out what's going on and release stuff. and AI can just not do that. It's not the same when a robot does that. So yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, to be honest, because I was a little worried with some of the AI stuff that I've seen. Like, it's going to take over everything. And I'm glad to see that it's not the case in every industry. So, and I mean, sure, I imagine it's because it's growing at an exponential pace. I would imagine that there's going to come a day where it does help out in every industry, but the amount that it helps out will be very different. And I'm glad to hear that it in this, the industry of therapy and coaching, that it's going to take a little longer. So that's good.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I think we as human beings still haven't fully understood our own potential. So a lot of people still underestimate that. And we have everything we need within us. Like I know there's a lot of fitness trackers. I know there's a lot of, ways to, for example, observe your own health and measure blood pressure. But we can do this ourselves. We actually don't need devices. Like if we, through practices of meditation and like other ways, we can understand where's something wrong in the body. We can feel that. We can feel when our blood pressure is high or low. We can observe ourselves when we eat something. Hey, is that good for me or bad for me? And so we actually don't need a lot of these external tools that we have right now because we can do all that ourselves. So yeah.
I'm curious to know like what specifically you're talking about there, or is there something like a specific example you talk about where, how can I tell what my blood pressure is, or if there's something else that you wanted to mention?
So the first thing or the easiest exercise for people is to see how does the body react when I'm eating something, right? So when I eat in a rushed way and in a stressed way, and I do not focus on the food properly, then my tummy tends to not be that happy about it. So, like, I know, you know what? I should just eat properly, not like at my laptop, just focus on the food. I can notice, if I eat certain processed food, do I get headache? How is my digestion? Um, or when I have certain other experiences in my life, like when I just had a meeting and I get headache and I keep getting that, like, why do I get that headache? What triggers me? And most times the answer will come to you. It's just that most people don't trust themselves enough, right? Um, in terms of blood pressure, like I can notice, if it's cold outside, but I'm going outside and my body's feeling really hot, then I know something's off, right?
Right.
So there's lots of ways to understand ourselves better. It just takes some practice and self-awareness, honest self-awareness.
Yeah, mindfulness, like you said. Yeah, I think that's the really the biggest part is people are so caught up in their screen time or their next appointment or whatever the case may be. And if they center themselves and focus on the now, they can notice those things more.
Yeah,
So,
and also many are not educated to understand that we have everything we need within us. So these days we're more told, hey, your body's faulty, your body has flaws, and you need to fix that. Right? You need something external to fix it, especially. But when we actually take a deep look at the human body, mind, soul, it always aims towards health. It always wants to be healthy. It never wants to be sick. So anything the body does and tells us is to be healthy. And so oftentimes that might be to have a rest. Like when you have headache, that's the first sign that you have too much going on in your head. So I tend to ask myself when I have headache, which is very rare these days, is what's going on there? What am I fussing about in my mind literally that's causing my head to hurt so much that it sends a signal, right?
mhm.
Um if the tummy is like if something is not working with your tummy, with the digestion, then we have a saying in German, I don't know how that goes in English, but it's like it's something is like hitting the tummy almost. So it's like what what is going on in your mind that you cannot digest? Literally, like what's bothering you so much that your gut is sending you a note? It's like I cannot digest the food. Like I can literally not digest what's going on in my life, right? Same with chronic pain, right? So it's with a lot of the issues, or pretty much any issue that you have going on physically, you can understand and determine the psychological reason for that, right? Now, the argument that then some people bring is, oh, but what about viruses and bacteria? Well, our body is made in a certain way that it can deal with any virus and bacteria. Again, it wants to be healthy. That's the main goal. So as soon as a virus or bacteria enters our body that's non-beneficial for us, because it's also beneficial, virus, bacteria, and pathogens, it gives us signals to understand what we should do to heal. So a lot of times when we are sick, for example, we feel tired, we feel exhausted. And that's the body's sign to tell you rest, because the body can only heal when it's a relaxed and restful state. So at any point in time when you're sick, your body will ask you to rest and relax. And unless you give your body that rest and relax, it cannot heal fully. You can force it to heal by taking external medicine and all of that. And sometimes that can be beneficial if it's like really, really, severe and whatever. But in most cases, people take it to not have to deal with the origin of the disease or sickness. And what happens then if you keep ignoring that over time and fixing it with like external stuff again and again, it's going to explode one day. And that's how people get very severe diseases. So it's all figure outable if we just understand that the body always wants to be healthy, and our bodies will never lie to us. They will always tell us what we should do. The only thing we just need to do is to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. The big thing there that I want to echo is that what you're describing is people are focusing on the symptom instead of looking for the root cause. Like if like you said, if you have a headache, the idea is not to fix the headache, it's to understand and address why your body created the headache in the first place, because our bodies desire homeostasis or health, like you're saying, right? So if we understand and start to look for root causes, that's why, at least to me, and probably yourself as well, Pamela, like when someone says they have ADD, I'm like, okay, let's see what's actually going on there, because
Yeah.
someone was again checking off the box for that type of stuff. So just wanted to echo that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the same with genetic diseases. So a lot of times people use genetics as an excuse for dealing with a disease that they think cannot be changed, but actually less than 1% of diseases are really genetic. And if we look into what genetic means that behaviors have been repeated over time so that they have been ingrained in our genetics, in our DNA. But that also means it can be changed. And studies have shown that we can literally change our DNA, like the way the proteins work.
Yep.
So very rarely, especially if people, use like obesity as like genetic disease. No, it's not. Obesity literally tells you people have been carrying a lot of weight around with them, a lot of stress that they haven't processed, which is why the mindset is so important when one tries to lose weight. And if we look at morbid obesity, studies, that's the ACE study that was done, I think, in the 90s, with over 17,000 people by Harvard, that showed that 100% of the people who were morbidly obese had experienced severe childhood trauma, if not sexual abuse even. So,
Wow.
and that can sometimes be carried for generations. So typically any kind of genetic information can be carried up to like seven generations. So you can also look a little bit at the family history that can help you explain some things. But it's you have to decide. The crucial fact is you have to decide you're going to do it differently. If you tell yourself, well, my story is that that's a genetic disease, then that's always going to be your story. And your body will always try to live up to your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the easiest way to understand this is that there's numerous brain scan studies that show that people who do an activity, like somebody who plays the piano professionally, somebody who tries to learn it, and somebody who's just watching them play, the same brain areas light up. So whether you're imagining something or seeing something or doing something, the same areas in your brain light up. And so you can literally use that amazing technology that you got to help you change your behavior to something more than beneficial than what you've been doing so far.
Well, I want to add on to that with a question, because all of the stuff that we're talking about, if you look deep enough, ends with food. And so I wanted to see, I'm personally into permaculture. I'm designing a rainwater collection system. I'm going to be, growing tons of food to make a mini food forest on my land. So what do you tell your clients when it comes to food? Because that's kind of the end of the rainbow when it comes to this stuff.
Fix it first, cut out sugar. Um, don't don't buy anything that you don't understand what's in it. I used to have allergies. I used to be allergic to like flour, like anything that's gluten, anything that was milk, eggs, garlic, broccoli, and then I got rid of it because you can't. That's also another thing. People believe that allergies they happen for life, which is not true. And so that taught me to literally turn around every single thing I bought and look at the ingredients. And so I just don't buy anything where I don't understand what's in it. And just don't even buy anything with just sugar in it, right? And sugar can be dextrose. Sugar can be, oh God, it comes in so many different names by
Yeah,
now.
today I think companies
Oh
like
my God.
try to find different ways that they can chemically make sugar and sell it to us so we get confused. Like
It's
that's
insane. It's insane. And John, like, just eat healthy, like cut out sugar.
yeah.
I feel better if I don't eat flour, but I still eat it sometimes because I grew up with bread. I love Austrian bread. It's amazing. But like see what makes you feel good and then eat more of that. Like I'm a big believer in having the right protein and vegetable and healthy fat mix. I think that most people need meat as a source of protein, of certain protein. So I would actually encourage people to eat healthy protein, ideally from like a farm close by. Um, yeah, and just reduce the sugar. That's all I'm saying. Trust me, when you reduce sugar, you already take care of probably 70% of your problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I try and tell people a lot as well. And that's the funny part when it comes to anything health and diet and also like mental related. At the end of the day, when you boil it all down, why you're having certain feelings, why you have pains or whatever, kind of ends up with the food that you're taking in. So yeah, cut out sugar, don't eat food from boxes, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the studies that there's been tons of studies that have shown us this. If you cook your own food, you live healthier, right? If children watch you cook food, they just learn a completely different upbringing. And my mom didn't just okay, she baked the cake every week when I grew up, which was amazing. So I'm a big baker, not always to
Nice.
my own benefit. But she also cooked almost every day, right? And so I still do that and I enjoy doing that for other people. And it keeps me healthy because like I just I don't eat out much. And if I do, then even then I tend to choose the more healthy stuff. So yeah, there's only benefits in it.
Awesome. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our time here. I'm not sure if Ty, you had any last questions you wanted to throw in here.
Yeah, I mean, there was I did want to briefly tap into your marketing and advertising expertise here, and it kind of ties into a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, specifically like the screen time and not getting outside, not moving. I've heard a lot of people reference kind of the age that we live in right now is the attention age, where like our resource is human attention, and companies compete for our attention, how long they can keep us on an app, how long they can keep us on a website, or how well they can motivate us to do something. How do you agree with that landscape of where we currently are, and maybe that plays into how companies strategize for marketing and advertising? And secondly, what is the impact of that on our just culture and society right now, that our just time that we spend looking at something is what everybody is competing for? How does that affect us from like a cultural or a societal standpoint?
So yes, companies are competing for attention, but attention now is changing towards engagement because there's so many things we could pay attention to, but then what do we actually engage with? And I think people are just trying to figure that out. We're just in that change right now. And also measuring when that happens, because a lot of times, you just take an action offline. So, how do you actually track it when people take offline action based on information they've seen online? And there's already a
Mhm.
few companies that can more or less do that based on your device data. So they know, hey, you saw an ad a couple days ago on your phone, and now you walked into the store, and then you bought something with your credit card, and so it's all connected. That's mostly possible in the US. Most other countries do not have such open non-data protection regulations. Let's put it that way. Um, but yeah, I think we're just starting to figure that out. People definitely need a lot of different touch points, not just like seeing a search ad, but like engaging with something visually, engaging with something while they hear an ad somewhere. So, for example, like if we look at offline advertising, like posters somewhere, it's always going to be relevant because these are all different ways of how we can engage people. So it's not anymore these days that you just put up a Google Ads campaign and you're suddenly going to get your sales in. There's a lot more that belongs to that, and it's a different mix for every company because things are changing so much. Like 10 years ago, you could say, oh, you know what, this worked for this dentist in this area, so I'm going to do that for all of the dentists. That's not how it works anymore. So it really has to be adjusted. And the one thing I just want to throw out as like a food for thought is what we haven't solved yet is actually capturing and measuring the people with the biggest buying potential, which is pensioners above the age of 65. Most platforms stop measuring at that age. They just say 65 plus, but we cannot measure 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and so on. But those are the people who have the money, who want to spend
Right.
it, right? Who are spending it. And I think that's a challenge for anybody who wants to solve it. Yeah, tapping into that generation as well.
Well, I would say if anyone tries to tap into that in Tennessee, they're going to have a very hard time because I worked for the state government for a few years and I dealt with some people who did not have smartphones. They had flip phones and it sounded like their internet was run by squirrels. So I would not recommend trying to do that in Tennessee.
It's changing in other places. It's
Yeah,
changing.
yeah. No, that's a really good point. Because we're focusing on engagement now, kind of follow up what Tyler was saying, how does that impact society long term? Like in the next 5 to 10 years, does that change the way that we're using our devices or the devices that we interact with?
To be honest, I'm not sure if most people will be able to consciously understand and then control that. I think the majority of people are controlled by their devices and the choices that they make. I do wish more people take time offline. I do wish more people turn off their internet in the evening when they go to sleep. I do wish more people went some time offline for a couple of days at least every year. Because that will help them really understand what triggers me, what really causes my actions on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, for now, I think a lot of people are very easily influenceable by just like the ads they see. Like it's very easy to just put up ads and influence somebody's perspective. So easy. And most people think they're making decisions based on their own. It's not. It's not. You've seen
No.
messages over and over again, maybe even micro messages blinking, popping up somewhere. And the only way really to find back to yourself is to turn that off. Delete Instagram from your phone, go offline, and really understanding one's own feelings. I think we're with all these external devices that we have now, we're made to believe you need an external device to understand yourself. And
Mm,
coming back to really knowing, no, you can know yourself. You have everything that you need to know yourself. You know what's right. But in order to know that, you need to return to stillness. You need to return to being okay with yourself on your own without any external influences. And that's probably the hardest part for most people.
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, it's an interesting perspective, especially because you're in both spaces with marketing and advertising, but then also telling people like stop watching stuff, get off, do things for you, right? It's just in this area, especially now that you're saying that engagement is kind of more of the priority or what companies are looking for. Yeah, I just worry about to a point where these strategies to get people to engage online, to get people to make buying decisions or to influence people's thoughts, whether it's political campaigns or whatever. There's a lot of strategies, right, that give us what our brain wants, right? Whether it's dopamine hits or anything that are going to keep us engaged longer on these things, and that's taking us away from doing the mindfulness practices, going outside, eating good food, cooking, interacting with humans. I just worry about a time to where these strategies become so perfected and effective that we can get everything our brain seemingly wants just by staying glued to different platforms, listening to different companies, looking at different political figures or whoever, and all of the other things that we know and that are super important for our health, for our family's health. Those things will continue to go down when these platforms become even more engaging than they already are.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to draw people's attention to is this time it's not anymore about the content we consume. And I've noticed this about myself when I go through Instagram. It's not that I go for the content anymore. I go for the comments, because it's the comment section that actually starts really driving my brain. And which is weird. It's been very weird to observe that about myself. So I'm trying to best reduce that again. But if people understand it, as a lot of content is not anymore put out there for you to consume that content, but it engages you because of the comments, because of what other people say about it. So it's almost like what the content is doesn't really matter anymore. It's what matters is that it stirs up people's conversations, because the platforms are driven in a way that the more engagement that you have, the better your account or ads are going to perform. Right. So
Right.
we notice you're the product pretty much, but just be aware of what actually engages you, because you can easily go down a rabbit hole.
That's a good point.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it here. We've kind of reached our time. Pamela, we usually let our guests tell listeners how they can get a hold of you if they need to reach out to you for business purposes, or if they need to find you on social media. How do people track you down?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Pamela Wagner, with my name. And you can also go to the ad agency's website if you need help with ads. Go to ajala.digital.com. So that's AJALA digital.com. And yeah, just reach out. I'm always looking forward to chatting, and getting to know people and seeing what moves them and how it can be of help.
Awesome. Well, I definitely think you've helped people with what you've talked about today, and we greatly appreciate your time. So thank you for hopping on.
Thank you too.
Yeah, thank you so much.